Would you say with that kind of worldview that Putin had, Putin and people like him, would it be fair to say that then ever since he came into power in the late 90s, he has wanted to absorb Ukraine into Russia? And is there any evidence that he had already begun planning as soon as he came into power?
What one can see is that he very much stayed loyal to these ideas that I discussed earlier that came into existence in the 1990s around Yeltsin, that Russia has in one form or another control and dominate the post-Soviet space. So there were before Yeltsin, before Putin came to power, there was Russian Prime Minister Yevgeny Primakov, who was one of advisors to Gorbachev, then to Yeltsin, and then the head of the Russian intelligence service before becoming prime minister. And he very much came with the idea that the bipolar world of the Cold War fell apart after the end of the Cold War. There is an American world, a unipolar world. Again, that's not Primakov's idea. Many people were writing about that. But Primakov was pushing for the idea that the unipolar world will not last for a long period of time. It's certainly a wrong way to organize international relations. It is not in Russian interests. And what would be in Russian interest is a multipolar world, where there is different poles. So Russia understood that it was not the Soviet Union, so there was no return to bipolar world. So the idea that there would be a multipolar world with China and European Union and Russia as one of the poles. But there also came very early realization that without somehow mobilizing resources of the post-Soviet space, it would be very difficult for Russia to become one of the poles in multipolar world. Which again was the sort of a thinking that was there before Putin, and Putin early on during his first term as the president was basically continuing in the Yeltsin's way of thinking and looking for the ways of how to do that by using political force and economic force. His big hope was that for joining Washington's at that time George W. Bush's war on terror, that he would get recognition from Washington and NATO for having Soviet Union as his sphere of influence. And that didn't work out. Then when he was almost there to bring Ukraine into the Russian sphere of influence, the Orange Revolution in 2004 started in Ukraine. A democratic revolution rejecting the sort of elections that Putin wanted to introduce in Ukraine, which would be manipulated, rejecting the candidate that Putin supported. It was Mr. Yanukovych at that time, and electing pro-Western democratic leader, Mr. Yushchenko. So for Putin, that was really a turning point. That West rejected his what he considered to be just claims for the Russian special rights in the post-Soviet space. That NATO continued expansion, including the Baltic states joined NATO. That his attempts to build this Russian bloc were undermined by democratic movements and public mobilization. He believed that the United States was behind that, both in terms of encouraging Ukrainians to rebel, but more than that, introducing this awful political model of democracy, right, which undermined not only his efforts outside of Russia, but also undermined his attempts to create more authoritarian regime in Russia itself. So he considered promotion of democracy to be an unfriendly move, really an attempt to personally undermine him. So the American ambassador in Moscow, Mike McFaul, is being pushed out. There is a personal grudge on the part of Putin to Hillary Clinton because he believes that she was the one who encouraged protests and supported protests in Russia in 2011, 2012. So that's where the really not goal didn't change, but that's where change came in terms of the selection of the tools and rhetoric and level of hostility that was there, not only vis-a-vis Ukraine, but also vis-a-vis the West. So, and the current war, it's war in Ukraine, but if you look at Putin's rhetoric, it was explained by him, legitimized by him on two levels. One level was fighting against the West. Another level was the argument that Ukrainians don't exist as a nation. So that one was imperial argument. This war on the West was really continuation of the multipolar world thinking that started before Putin, that started in the 1990s.